The quiet before the storm, Captain. Zara Vex pressed her scaled hand against the observation deck's reinforced glass and watched the stars. 45 years of peace had made the galaxy a comfortable place. Trade routes flowed like rivers between worlds. Conflicts were settled through diplomacy rather than warfare. The great powers of the Galactic Union worked together in harmony that previous generations could never have imagined. It was strange how quiet everything had become after the humans disappeared. Zara remembered her grandmother's stories about the old days when humans walked among the stars. They were an odd species, neither the strongest nor the smartest, but possessed of a peculiar determination that made other races nervous. Her grandmother had called them the stubborn ones, because they never seemed to know when to quit fighting for what they believed was right. Then, one day 45 years ago, they were simply gone. Not dead, not destroyed, just gone. Their colonies stood empty. Their ships vanished from space lanes. Their communications networks went silent. Every human in the galaxy had vanished overnight, as if they had never existed at all. Most species assumed they had retreated to their homeworld and destroyed themselves in some final catastrophic war. It seemed like something humans would do. The galaxy mourned for exactly 1 standard year, then moved on. Without human stubbornness disrupting trade negotiations and peace talks, galactic civilization flourished. Wars became rare. Prosperity increased. Many species privately admitted that life was easier without humans around to complicate everything with their strange moral codes and refusal to accept simple answers to complex problems. Zara had been born 20 years after the humans disappeared. To her, they were legends, stories told by older generations about a species that refused to compromise even when compromise would save their lives. She had never met a human, never seen their stubborn determination firsthand, never witnessed their ability to find solutions that no one else could imagine. Her communication console chimed softly. Lieutenant Koss, her tactical officer, appeared on the screen. His reptilian features showed unusual concern. "Captain, we're detecting some unusual readings from the outer rim sensors. You might want to see this." Zara made her way to the bridge of the Tyrellian warship Peaceful Current. Her crew was the best the defense fleet had to offer. Seasoned veterans who had spent decades keeping pirate raids and smuggling operations under control. They were good at their jobs because their jobs had been relatively easy for the past 4 decades. "Report," she said, settling into her command chair. Koss manipulated the holographic display, showing sensor readings from the galaxy's outer rim. "We're picking up gravitational anomalies moving in from deep space, multiple contacts, extremely large mass signatures." Zara studied the display. The numbers made no sense. According to the readings, objects larger than moons were approaching from the empty space between galaxies. "Run diagnostics on the sensor array. These readings are impossible." "Already did, Captain. 3 times. The sensors are working perfectly." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. Nothing that large could move through space under its own power. The gravitational forces would tear apart any known material. Even the massive city ships of the Corvanian Empire were tiny compared to these readings. "How many contacts?" Zara asked. "Initial count shows 47 objects, but more are appearing as they get closer. They're moving at significant sublight speeds directly toward the core systems." Zara felt her throat constrict. The core systems contained the capitals of every major species in the Union. If these objects were hostile, billions of lives were at risk. "Open a channel to Union Command. Priority Alpha." Within minutes, Admiral Tharn appeared on her screen. The aged Corvanian's usually calm demeanor showed cracks of worry. "Captain Vex, we're receiving similar reports from observation posts throughout the rim. What's your assessment?" "Unknown contacts of unprecedented size approaching from intergalactic space, sir. Whatever they are, they're bigger than anything we've ever seen. We need immediate reinforcement and civilian evacuation protocols." Admiral Tharn's mandibles clicked nervously. "Reinforcement is already being organized. Every available ship is being recalled to defensive positions around the core worlds." "But Captain, there's something else you need to know." The Admiral paused, seeming to struggle with his words. "The trajectory analysis is complete. These objects, are coming from the direction of the Milky Way's outer spiral arm, from the region where human space used to be. The bridge crew exchanged glances. Everyone knew the stories. Humans had occupied a small section of the galaxy before their disappearance, a handful of worlds on the outer edge of explored space. The region had been marked as hazardous and avoided for decades. Sir, you're not suggesting... I'm not suggesting anything, Captain. I'm stating facts. 47 objects larger than moons are approaching from the direction of former human space 45 years after every human in the galaxy vanished without explanation. Zara felt ice form in her stomach. Her grandmother's stories suddenly seemed much more relevant. The stubborn ones who never knew when to quit. Orders, sir. Fall. Back to defensive line Gamma. All civilian traffic is being diverted away from the approach vector. We're implementing full military lockdown on all core systems. The connection ended. Zara looked at her crew, all of them species that had prospered in humanity's absence. They were competent, well-trained, experienced. They were also completely unprepared for whatever was coming. Helm set course for defensive line Gamma. Best possible speed. As her ship turned away from the approaching objects, Zara thought about her grandmother's favorite human story. It was about a human diplomat who had attended the last Galactic Council session before their species disappeared. The other representatives had been discussing human population growth and resource consumption, debating whether humans should be restricted to certain systems to prevent them from overwhelming more established civilizations. The human delegate had listened quietly for hours as species after species described humans as a potential threat that needed to be contained. Finally, she had stood to speak. "My people have a saying," the human woman had said in her soft voice. "The most dangerous enemy is the one who has nothing left to lose." 3 months later, every human in the galaxy had vanished. Zara's communication console lit up with incoming messages from across the Union. Reports of massive objects detected by long-range sensors, military fleets mobilizing, civilian populations being evacuated from border systems. The carefully maintained peace of the past 45 years was cracking under the weight of fear. "Captain," Koss reported, "we're receiving updated sensor data from the deep space monitoring stations. The objects are accelerating. They'll reach the outer defense perimeter in 14 standard hours. 14 hours to prepare for the return of a species that the galaxy had written off as extinct. 14 hours to ready defenses against objects that defied physics. 14 hours before they learned whether the humans had truly been destroyed, or if they had simply been waiting." Zara activated the ship's internal communications. "All hands, this is the captain. As you know, we are facing an unprecedented situation. Unknown contacts are approaching our space, and we are moving to intercept. I want everyone at their stations and ready for anything. We are the first line of defense for over 1 trillion innocent lives." She paused, thinking of her grandmother's words about human determination. "Whatever comes through that darkness, we will meet it with courage and honor. We will protect the peace we have built, and we will remember that sometimes the greatest threats come from those we thought we understood." The peaceful current raced through hyperspace toward what might be the most important battle in galactic history. Behind them, the mysterious objects continued their approach, carrying secrets that had been hidden in the void for 45 years. In her ready room, Zara pulled up the old historical files about humanity. She read accounts of their wars, their diplomacy, their stubborn refusal to accept defeat even when facing impossible odds. She studied reports of their technology, their social structures, their philosophy of never leaving anyone behind. By the time she finished reading, she was no longer sure whether the approaching objects represented salvation or doom. She only knew that the galaxy was about to be reminded why humans had been called the stubborn ones. The stars watched in silence as fleets gathered and civilizations prepared for the return of a species that had refused to die quietly in the dark. The reckoning arrives. Commander Elena Torres stood on the bridge of the HSS Defiance and felt the weight of 45 years pressing down on her shoulders. Around her, the command crew worked with the quiet efficiency of people who had been born in the space between stars, raised on stories of a blue world they had never seen, trained from childhood to bring their species home. Through the massive viewport, she could see the other ships of the return fleet. Each vessel was a masterwork of desperate innovation, built from the bones of dead worlds and powered by technologies that the old galaxy would consider impossible. They were beautiful and terrible. At the same time, these ships that humanity had created during their long exile in the void. "Ma'am, we're detecting the Union fleet on long-range sensors," reported Navigation Officer Chen. Like most of the second generation, he spoke with the careful precision of someone who had learned language from computers rather than parents. Approximately 8,000 ships arranged in defensive formation around the core systems. Elena nodded. She had expected this. The galaxy had built a comfortable civilization in humanity's absence, and comfortable civilizations always feared change. They would see the return fleet as a threat rather than the homecoming it truly was. "Any response to our communication attempts?" "Still nothing, ma'am. They're maintaining complete communication silence." Elena wasn't surprised. The return fleet's appearance would have shocked the Union leadership. 47 ships, each one larger than the space cities they had built in their golden age, approaching from a region of space that had been considered empty and lifeless for nearly half a century. She activated her personal communication system. "This is Commander Torres to Admiral Reyes. Status report." Admiral Marcus Reyes appeared on her screen. At 78, he was one of the few people in the fleet who remembered Earth before the Exodus. His face carried the lines of someone who had spent decades making impossible decisions in service of humanity's survival. "All ships report ready, Elena. Our deep space sensors show massive military buildup throughout the inner systems. They're taking this very seriously." "Good, they should be. Are our people ready?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "They've been ready their whole lives. This is what we trained them for. The question is whether we're ready for what we've become." Elena understood what he meant. The humans who had left the galaxy 45 years ago had been a young species, idealistic and hopeful, still believing that reason and goodwill could solve any problem. The humans who were returning had been forged in the cold void between galaxies, shaped by decades of absolute necessity and the simple refusal to die. "Ma'am," Chen interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission from the Union fleet." The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of what appeared to be the flagship of the defensive fleet. The captain was a tall reptilian being with scales that shifted color based on emotional state. Right now, those scales showed deep blue fear. "Unknown vessels, this is Captain Zara Vex of the Tyrellian Defense Fleet. You are approaching restricted space without authorization. Identify yourselves and state your intentions." Elena stepped forward into the camera's view. She was tall and pale, with the kind of silver hair that came from decades of recycled air and artificial light. Her eyes held the weight of a species that had learned to survive in places where survival should have been impossible. "Captain Vex, this is Commander Elena Torres of the human space fleet. We are returning home." The effect of her words was immediate. Captain Vex's scales shifted to bright yellow shock, and Elena could hear surprised voices from the alien bridge crew. "That's impossible," Captain Vex said. "Humans have been extinct for 45 years. "Extinct is a strong word, Captain. We prefer to think of ourselves as having been away on business." Elena gestured to someone off-screen, and the transmission expanded to show the full scope of the return fleet. 47 massive vessels moving in perfect formation, each one a city unto itself, each one carrying the hopes and dreams of a species that had refused to accept extinction. "This is the human return fleet," Elena continued. "We represent the surviving population of Earth and her colonies. We have spent the last 45 years in the void between galaxies, and we have come home to reclaim what was taken from us. Captain O." Vex was silent for several seconds, her scales cycling through colors too quickly to follow. "Commander Torres, you must understand. The galaxy has changed since your departure. We have built a peaceful civilization. Wars are virtually extinct. Billions of beings live in harmony across thousands of worlds." "That's wonderful news, Captain. We're looking forward to rejoining that peaceful civilization. But your ship—" Captain Vex gestured helplessly at the display showing the massive human vessels. "They're larger than anything we've ever seen. The implications of such technology—" Elena's expression grew cold. Captain Vex, 45 years ago, the Galactic Council voted to restrict human expansion. They called us a rapidly multiplying threat and suggested that our population growth needed to be controlled. They proposed limiting us to a handful of worlds on the galactic rim. That was before my time, Commander. I don't know the details of those discussions. Then let me remind you. The Council decided that humanity was too dangerous to be allowed to spread freely through the galaxy. They said we bred too fast, consumed too many resources, and disrupted their comfortable status quo. They wanted to put us in a cage. Elena paused, thinking of all the people who had died during the Exodus, all the children who had been born in the darkness, all the sacrifices that had been made to ensure humanity's survival. So we left. We took every human we could find, every ship we could fly, every piece of knowledge we could carry, and we disappeared into the void. We spent 45 years learning to live in places where life shouldn't be possible. We built cities in empty space. We mined resources from dead stars. We developed technologies that your scientists would consider miracles. The communication channel crackled with incoming signals from across the Union fleet. Elena could hear the chatter of frightened officers reporting to their commanders, requesting orders, trying to understand what they were facing. Commander Torres, Captain Vex said carefully, "What exactly are your intentions now that you've returned?" Elena smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant smile. "Our intentions are simple, Captain. We want our homeworld back. We want safe passage through the galaxy. We want recognition as a sovereign species with all the rights that entails. And if we refuse, then you'll learn why we spent 45 years building ships like these." The transmission ended abruptly from the Union side. Elena turned to her tactical officer, a serious young woman who had been born on one of the deep space habitats. "Lieutenant Morrison, what's the status of our defensive systems?" "All ships report full combat readiness, ma'am. Shields at maximum power, weapons armed and ready." Elena nodded. She hoped it wouldn't come to violence, but humanity had learned during their exile that hope was a luxury they couldn't afford. They had also learned that sometimes the only way to ensure peace was to be prepared for war. "Ma'am," Chen reported, "we're detecting massive energy buildups throughout the Union fleet. They're preparing to attack." Elena wasn't surprised. Fear made people do predictable things, and she could imagine the panic that must be spreading through the Union command structure. A supposedly extinct species had returned from the dead with impossible technology and demands for their homeworld. From their perspective, it probably looked like an invasion. "Open a channel to all ships in the return fleet," she ordered. The communication system activated, connecting her voice to every human vessel in the formation. Thousands of people who had spent their entire lives preparing for this moment. "This is Commander Torres to all ships. The Union fleet is powering weapons. We knew this day would come. We knew that our return would not be welcomed with open arms. But we also know that we have every right to be here. This is our galaxy too. These are our stars too. And we will not be driven into exile again." She paused, thinking of the blue world in the old photographs, the home that most of her people had never seen but still remembered in their dreams. "All ships prepare for defensive action. We did not survive 45 years in the void just to be destroyed on the threshold of home." The space around them began to shift as the return fleet moved into combat formation. Each ship was a testament to human ingenuity and determination, built from pure necessity and powered by the simple refusal to accept defeat. On her tactical display, Elena could see the Union fleet beginning its attack approach. 8,000 ships representing dozens of species, all united in their fear of what humanity had become during their long absence. It was the largest military force Elena had ever seen, and it was focused entirely on preventing humanity's return to the galaxy. But as she looked at her own fleet, at the massive vessels that had been born from desperation and raised in the darkness between stars, she felt no fear. Humanity had learned to survive in the void. They had learned to build impossible things from nothing. They had learned to thrive in places where other species would have died in days. Most importantly, they had learned that sometimes coming home required fighting for the right to exist. All ships, Elena broadcast. "This is our moment. This is what we trained for. This is why we survived when survival was impossible. Show them what humanity has become." The return fleet activated its weapons systems, and the Galaxy learned that the stubborn ones had not forgotten how to fight.